Hello and welcome in, you guys. We got One Piece chapter 1128 full spoilers here with us today. My name is Sai, and we're just going to be talking about the latest updates to the upcoming chapter and just having some fun with it. So with that being said, let's get right to it. So, we start off the chapter, and it turns out that the village we saw last chapter, alongside with Big Stein Castle, are indeed fake. It's all a part of one big toy box diorama birdcage thing. It's just a giant kingdom encapsulated in a dome of mirrors and glass. The Straw Hats don't find this out right away. Instead, they travel to the village, they talk to some of the people, and it turns out that the villagers refer to this place, this kingdom, well, kingdom in quotation marks, as the land of gods. So when I first heard that, I was like, okay, like this could be a celestial dragon type thing, right? Maybe this is a sun god, a person that really admires the celestial dragon life, right? Maybe they're just a little bit of a weirdo, the person who owns this diorama. Turns out that's not the case. That's not the reason why it's named this. The reason why they call it the land of gods is because it houses three incredible monsters. There's the ear god, the spike god, and the cat god. I think we get names for them. I kind of forgot them because they're so damn forgettable. I mean, two of them are like dead and gone, right? But yes, turns out that Luffy, without knowing it, killed one of the three gods. Nami, or should I say Zeus, defeated another one, and then the monster trio took down the cat god, Eastcat, I think is how it's pronounced. And yeah, without even knowing it, the Straw Hats have swiftly taken down the gods who have been ruling this land. Pretty fitting if you ask me. Like I said, last chapter, and even in the brief spoilers, this chapter, Elbaf so far, has reminded me of classic One Piece. Between the gags, how the plot's progressing, and how different everything is, I'm really enjoying it, right? We'd even get a gag where when the guy's talking about the gods, Luffy's about to say, oh, my bad, we ate him, but obviously the crew has to shut him up. It's kind of crazy how they describe it too. When they talk about the ear god, they don't just say the ear god was eaten or the ear god was defeated. No, the giant, according to the full spoilers, says, yeah, his body was burned to a crisp outside in the forest. That's like, damn, that is brutal, Luffy. You didn't even clean up after yourself? So yeah, the Straw Hats, after hearing that, you know, they go on with the conversation, and the giant tells them, or I gotta stop calling him a giant, but the villager who's dressed in giant's clothing, or Elbaf clothing, says, yeah, by the way, there's one part of the village you should never go to. Never go to the other side of the castle, because that is where the sun god's temple is. In that castle, there are guardians, right? There's people who are going to stop you over there. And then Luffy, of course, after hearing this, after hearing he shouldn't go somewhere, alarm bells start ringing in his head, and he's like, damn, we need to go there right away. And then even Zoro joins in, and he's like, oh, there's guardians there? There's people we can fight? We gotta go. So the Straw Hats take off in one direction until they hit the edge of the world. You know, Luffy runs straight, and then he runs into the mirror, and then he bursts out of the toy box. And that is when we see that Chopper was actually right outside of the diorama this entire time. He screams for help. He's actually collared up. It kind of sounds like the sun god wanted to keep Chopper as a pet, which I think is pretty interesting, right? Like the rest of the Straw Hats, the sun god just tossed them in the diorama or the toy box. And then for Chopper, he's like, wait a minute, Chopper? I'm gonna put him right here, you know? It looks like the sun god has a thing for animals now that I think about it, right? Because we had the hedgehog, we had the bees in there, we had the cat, we had a lot of animals just running rampant. And hell, there's even animals running rampant outside of the toy box, because we meet a giant snake and we also meet a giant crow. And they end up fighting the Straw Hats. And these guys, they're kind of tough cookies from the sound of it, because Luffy has to activate Gear 5 to take him down. I'm sure Luffy could have beaten him without Gear 5. I think it's more so for the plot. But yeah, Luffy's in Gear 5. He takes down the giant snake, and then Zoro takes down the crow. And maybe it's because I'm around a lot of One Piece theorists, and because I dibble dabble in theories every now and then. But when I saw this, I was like, okay, all right, Oda. You got Luffy taking down, a knockoff version of Jormungandr, and then you have Zoro taking down a crow. Like, I just look at this, and I'm like, okay, Zoro and Crow, maybe he takes down Mihawk. This is like foreshadowing of that, because that is a fight that will happen one day. And then as far as Luffy taking down the giant snake, you know, people have been talking about this for years, but they're like, hey, maybe there's a reality where Luffy does take down Jormungandr, or the blood-soaked serpent that Dory and Brogy talked about back in like chapter, I think like 1120-ish. But that's a side point, right? What happens after they take down these animals is that the sun god walks into the room. He walks in and he sees Gear 5th Luffy just manhandling his giant snake, which kind of sounds bad out of context, but yes, the giant sees Luffy in his sun god form as clear as day, and then starts the chase. The Straw Hats run back into the diorama to escape him. They hop on the cat they defeated last chapter, and the cat's giving them a ride through the Lego town. And then Nami says, hey, we need to burst through this wall over here. And we end off the chapter right there, before they break through that wall. Nami says if they break the wall, they will end up outside. We don't know what that looks like yet. They could be going into another diorama. They could be going into another room of the, quote, sun god's house. Or perhaps once they break through that wall, they'll end up outside to wherever it is they're at. We're not too sure if they're actually on Warland or Elbaf. For all we know, this could just be a pirate ship, and this guy's just a weirdo who likes to mimic Elbaf things, right? When it comes to the naming scheme, when it comes to the Viking clothing and Yggdrasil, this could just be a giant weirdo who has an obsession with Elbaf. I think that could be the case here, but we're not too sure yet, right? As far as the, quote, sun god goes, he is described as a giant larger than any giant we've seen before, except for Oars. It turns out that Oars might still be taller than this guy, but all in all, this guy does seem a little bit special. From his height to his weird deer skull, even to a slim body. I thought that was another unique way to describe this character. Redon says the sun god is a slim giant that wears a black long tunic and a deer skull with big antlers and a mane that covers his or her face. The sun god also has a staff and has a shield with the sun symbol. Yeah, this is a really unique looking giant, to say the least. Right now, I'm just really curious to see why this person is called the sun god. Is this a title they gave to themselves? Is this a title that the villagers of the diorama gave to this person? Are they perhaps a sun god Nika descendant? Because that could be a reality, right? Sun god Nika existed in Elbaf way before the Void Century. Maybe they had kids, and then their kids had kids, and then we ended up with this weirdo, right? Another thing could be that maybe this person is a different type of sun god. Maybe there's like sun god worshippers, and this is just one of them. Because that's kind of how I'm envisioning it right now. Because there's nothing about this person's fit that screams sun god, right? The guy has a deer skull, guy or girl, we don't know yet. This person has a deer skull, a black mane. They're also thinner than any other giant we've seen before. So there's a lot of weird things about this character. And then even at the end, right, when they're chasing the Straw Hats, I'm still not sure what their intentions are. You know, yesterday I kind of brought up the idea that maybe there's just a misunderstanding here. You know, maybe they see the real sun god and they're like, oh, I want to talk to you, you know, like, whoa, let me explain. But then in the full spoilers, this guy or girl actually says, how dare you? You won't get away. So it's like, okay, it doesn't look like they're going to explain anything, right? It looks like they're actually just upset that the Straw Hats have busted out and are ruining their room. So yeah, there's a lot of weird things going on here. As far as why the Straw Hats aren't just straight up fighting this guy, I think it's a gag. You know, it's a gag, plus they're bigger than any giant they've seen before, minus Oars. So I could totally see them just wanting to run for the fun of it. They also have the cat that they're riding on, so it feels like a honest-to-God adventure. And then plus Nami has a blueprint saying if they destroy a wall, they can just leave right away. Outside of this, though, you know, again, in the full spoilers, they mention nothing about the inconsistencies and mistakes from last chapter. That does lead me to believe that they're all just honest-to-God mistakes. And then as far as the illusions that the leakers mentioned yesterday, turns out those were actual just visual illusions, right? It's because nothing here is, quote, real or what it seems. The sky or the ground that Luffy saw is actually all Legos and mirrors, and it's all just one big diorama. So yes, it was just visual illusions. I think Luffy's sword turning into an axe and the Gear 3rd, Gear 4th thing, it's all just mistakes. That is what I believe, and that's not a bad thing, right? I've seen some people take that as a negative on Oda. It's not. Oda has a big team. He does a weekly manga. He's got a lot of people working on a singular chapter every single day. So mistakes like that happen, especially when entering into a new arc. And then, as far as hallucinations go with the Absinthe or Green Fairy, I believe that will play a vital role in explaining how we got here. But I don't think they're hallucinating currently. I think this is all real. Too much has happened. You know, Luffy has defeated multiple people at this point. He's bursted through. We've seen the giant room. We've seen the Legos being kind of explained. So yeah, I think there are no illusions at play yet. We will get illusions later, I bet, with how magic is going to come full circle into One Piece with Loki, or maybe even Emu, perhaps. I think that will play a role later. But as far as this chapter and last chapter, I don't think there's anything weird afoot yet. Oh yeah, one more theory that I've seen people bring up recently is that maybe, just maybe, the sun god that we see in this chapter is actually a giant kid. And I like that conceptually because it would make sense, right? The Lego bricks, they're playing, they have a one-to-one set of Elbaf. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. The one hang-up I have with that theory, though, is that this giant is larger than your average giant. You know, the leakers go out of their way to say that. So if this is a kid, then this is a goddamn massive kid. Maybe it could be like an ancient giant, kind of like Oars. They do mention Oars, you know, when comparing the size. So maybe this is like a kid version of an ancient giant. And if that is the case, I could see this happening. But yeah, just food for thought. I did like that theory a lot. Another theory I've kind of been playing with is that maybe the sun god we see in this chapter is actually related to the 4 gods that they mentioned all the way back in Skypiea. Because they did talk about a sun god, an earth god, a forest god, and even a rain god. So this could just be one of the 4. I think one major hint we have right now as to the sun god's real identity would be the giant letter Z we apparently see on the door that leads to where the Straw Hats are being held. That could be in reference to the name of the sun god. That could even be a reference to where they're currently at. I think there's a lot of good options with that. And now, kind of spinning this in the opposite direction, I just want to talk about Usopp, because Luffy does mention something pretty interesting at the start of the chapter. He turns to Usopp and he says, hey, Usopp, if you weren't panicking, you would have been able to take down that giant cat lion. And it seems like Usopp kind of agrees with this. And I feel like that's so notable because so many people expect Usopp to become a brave warrior of the sea by the end of the story, or even by the end of Elbaf. So this could be that first step on his journey to it, right? Maybe this is the part where he starts realizing that, hey, I can take down these larger-than-life animals, I just have to not be a coward. And now, the last thing I want to talk about before we end off this video, but I do believe that we will see a real Yggdrasil tree once we break out of the Sun God's house. Because, you know, at first I was wondering why he named it Yggdrasil, but now that we get the full context of it, now that we know it is a diorama that they were in the entire time, and that this sun god has meticulously created, you know, Elbaf clothing and Elbaf attire, it's like, okay, this guy just wanted a one-to-one, you know, replica of real life. So I do think that the Yggdrasil tree exists outside of this room, or outside of wherever they're at right now, and I'm kind of excited for it, and I want to see how close this guy's recreation of Elbaf is to the real thing. But yeah, there's a lot of cool things going here, man. And of course, there is still the Chopper mystery. Why was Chopper getting special treatment? Does this person just have a weird knack for animals? I think that might be the case. Or it could do with the fact that Chopper is, of course, a reindeer. And since this person has a deer skull in their head, maybe they just saw Chopper and said, hey, I'm gonna groom him. I'm gonna groom him for my next helmet. We don't know yet. Like I said, there's still so many questions coming off of this chapter. Oda gave us just as many answers as he did new mysteries. So with that being said, though, thank you guys so much for joining me on this little adventure. Hopefully you enjoyed the chapter. Hopefully you liked it. Let me know what you thought about it down below, though. Let me know all of your theories and thoughts coming off of it, and I will catch you guys in the next video where we go through some of your comments and have a little discussion. So yeah, with that being said, my name is Sai, and I'm signing out. Peace.